Hey guys, tonight we're heading back in time to a place where your breath fogs in the morning, and the windows, if you even have them, are covered with greasy cloth instead of glass. It's winter in a medieval English village, and you, one unlucky soul, are a peasant. The kind who sleeps on straw, wakes before dawn, and counts turnips like treasure. Outside, the frost glitters on thatched rooftops like tiny shards of moonlight. Inside, it's only marginally warmer. There's a fire, yes, but it's mostly ash now, and you're curled under a blanket that smells faintly of lanolin and several winters' worth of effort. The air bites your nose. You try to wiggle your toes, and the response is inconclusive. This is what survival looks like in a 14th century December. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a cold part of the world tonight, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin the day shivering beneath a scratchy wool blanket, trying to decide whether it's worth the effort to emerge. The mattress beneath you is a sack stuffed with straw and possibly the odd mouse. You share this bed with your spouse, 3 of your children, and depending on the year, a cousin who never quite left after the harvest feast. There's a jug of half-frozen cider by the hearth. Your breath puffs visibly in the dim morning gloom. The roof above you is thatch, which means it leaks a little every time the snow melts. Yes, melts because snowmelt finds the tiniest cracks and drips rhythmically into the corners. You once tried to patch the holes with moss, but moss, it turns out, is a spring solution. Right now it's frozen and crumbling, like your dreams of an extra blanket. In the cold months, your body becomes something you manage. Fingers are always a bit numb. Your feet never really feel dry. There's a trick, though. If you sleep with a heated stone wrapped in cloth, you can keep your core warm for almost an hour. Of course, heating the stone requires a fire, and firewood is never plentiful. You remember, bitterly, that in October you argued with your neighbor about fallen branches from the shared tree. Historians still argue whether winter was objectively worse in the medieval period or just differently difficult. Some say there were more frequent mini-ice ages. Others argue the technology like open hearths with no chimneys made winter feel longer than it was. What's certain is this: you plan your entire winter around warmth, or more accurately, the illusion of warmth. The hearth is the home's beating heart. There's no flue, so the smoke curls up into the rafters and drifts lazily out through the thatch. It also lingers, which is sort of the point. A smoky ceiling helps preserve the beams, repel bugs, and occasionally fumigate the lice out of your shirt. But it also makes your eyes sting. When guests come over, everyone agrees. A smoky house means a smart peasant. Outside, the snow crunches hard. You hesitate at the threshold. There's no front door so much as a woven curtain. You inhale. Cold rushes in, all at once, like an unexpected baptism. It takes your breath away and gives your spine a jolt. There's no escaping the air. It gets into everything, curls up in your lungs, and makes itself at home. But you're used to this. You were born in a chill like this. Your first memory might even be winter, your mother blowing warmth onto your fingertips while singing an old rhyme about St. Bridget's hearth. You begin your chores by checking the food stores. In one corner, a few onions in a basket, a wheel of cheese grown suspiciously blue, and an aging turnip that's developing personality. You'd planned for more, but the last harvest was stingy. Your neighbor lost half his grain to mold. You'll trade some ale for his cabbage next week. Your coat is a patched thing of wool and wishful thinking. You pull it close and step outside. The chickens complain softly, feathers puffed up in a failed attempt at insulation. The cow has icicles on her whiskers. You pat her and whisper an apology. You both know there's no fresh hay today. As you look around your tiny plot, it's hard not to admire the strange beauty of the frost on the fences. Each splinter catches the light, and for a moment you forget that your toes have gone completely numb. The air is still. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Closer to home, your child coughs in his sleep. You wonder if it's just the cold or something worse. You press your hand to the rough wood of your house. This place has seen winters before, dozens of them. Your grandfather died in that corner peacefully, after a bowl of warm broth. Your cousin gave birth in the loft one snowy February. The memories are layered like quilts. It's a tough life, yes, but it's your life, and somehow, despite the hunger, the cold, and the frost on your pillow, you've learned how to survive it. You pull your wool tunic tighter, although it makes little difference. The fabric is thick but not exactly luxurious, coarse, scratchy, and never quite dry from yesterday's snow. Underneath you wear a second layer that might once have belonged to your uncle, judging by the smell and the way the stitching pulls around the shoulders. Getting dressed in winter isn't about style, it's about survival, and even that's a bit optimistic. Lice are your constant companions. In warmer months, you sometimes boil your underclothes in the communal cauldron or hang them over nettle steam, but now, in the grip of winter, it's easier to pretend they aren't there. Everyone itches, everyone shrugs. Lice don't bother the dead, and if you're still scratching, well, congratulations. Laundry day comes rarely and grudgingly. There's no washboard, just a wooden tub and some lye soap that makes your hands sting. You walk to the river if it hasn't frozen over crack through the ice and start scrubbing. The wind howls. Your fingers go pink, then purple, then something beyond color. You wonder briefly what fingers are even for. Historians still argue how often peasants really bathed. Some claim it was once or twice a year, festival days, maybe. Others suggest that washing hands and faces was more common than we imagine, but full immersion was rare. Water was cold, risky, and in winter, downright dangerous. You'd rather be a little stinky than dead of chilblains and pneumonia. You tie a belt around your tunic to keep it in place. Not a proper leather belt, those are expensive, but a woven cord, the ends of which have frayed into a fringe. You like it, honestly. It gives you shape. At least, that's what you tell yourself. Over your shoulders goes a cloak or something like one. It's patched with different shades of brown, one piece even cut from an old sack. Fasteners are a luxury, so you use a stick pin or, in leaner times, just tuck it under your chin and hope the wind behaves. Shoes, that's generous. What you have are foot wraps and rough boots made from hide and twine. If you're lucky, they're lined with hay. If you're less lucky, the hay has already frozen to the sole. Some days, you're not sure where the boot ends and your toes begin. You keep walking anyway. Children run barefoot indoors, mostly out of habit. You tell them not to, but you did the same at their age. They'll learn, the hard way. The cold is a teacher more consistent than you are. Your wife, broad-handed and brisk, is layering her skirts. Wool again, always wool. She owns two, one she's wearing. The other, drying by the fire, will become tomorrow's undergarments, if you mean a linen shift maybe, but mostly it's just skin and stubbornness. Head coverings are essential. Not for modesty though, the priest always makes that part of the sermon, but to keep your ears. You tie a woolen scarf around your head, then add a hood. It smells faintly of onions and tallow smoke, which is oddly comforting. Your oldest son wraps a length of rag around his neck like a tiny knight preparing for war. His mittens are mismatched. One was dropped in the well last Candlemas and came back stiffer than ever. Still, he's proud of them. They're his. In a world without central heating, your clothes are your armor. The layers trap body heat, sure, but they also trap smells, secrets, and the occasional mouse. You once found a beetle in your sleeve and named him Walter. He stayed with you through most of Advent. For festive occasions like St. Nicholas's Day, or that one wedding where the goat got into the cider, You might wear your best tunic, meaning it has fewer holes and slightly shinier buttons. Buttons, by the way, are wooden discs or bones carved thin, and they never quite stay buttoned. There's a fringe school of thought among your village elders that winter clothing should be lightly smoked over burning herbs. Keeps the demons out, they say, though you suspect it's mostly to keep out fleas. Either way, the result is a delightful aroma of thyme, sweat, and mystery meat. You pass a neighbor on the road, bundled like a walking haystack. He grunts a greeting, you nod. Words waste heat. You remember one winter, a bad one, when the snow was waist-high for 3 days. The wind whistled so loudly that you and your family wore cloths over your ears indoors. You lost 2 chickens and a cat that week. The cat came back in spring, pregnant. No one asked questions. A few villagers make their own clothes, though not you. You trade for yours with the weaver, who always smells faintly of wet sheep. She tells long stories about the quality of her loom, as if it were royalty. Her wool is good, though, and she doesn't cheat on the measurements. That said, everyone repairs. Needles are precious, thread more so. You hoard bits of yarn like treasure. Mending night is an event. Family seated by firelight, squinting at hems and muttering about old seams. The kids help, threading needles or fetching more light. You curse every time you prick your finger, but secretly you enjoy the ritual. Sometimes, when the wind howls too loudly, you imagine grander outfits, a fur-lined cloak perhaps, or a doublet like the Lord Steward wears. But those are for a different life. You've got your layers, your lice, and your lopsided boots. That's enough. Tomorrow, if the thaw holds, you might wash your shift, or at least turn it inside out. Either way, you'll survive another day. Your stomach grumbles before you even leave the hearth. That's a good sign. It means you haven't starved yet. Breakfast is whatever's left. You eye the pot near the fire. It contains yesterday's stew, reheated until the turnips surrender. The smell is familiar, earthy, slightly sour, with a hopeful whiff of thyme. You scoop out a ladleful and add a hunk of coarse bread. The crust is hard enough to repel arrows, but once you soak it, it becomes marginally edible. This is winter food, calculated, stretched, and boiled until the flavors surrender their secrets. Your diet now is less about pleasure and more about survival mathematics. Each turnip must last. Each onion is precious. Beans are worth their weight in curses if they're dried poorly. Midwinter meals revolve around what's stored, not what's desired. Gone are the berries, the green herbs, the eggs collected fresh from the co-op. In their place, root vegetables, smoked bits of pork if you were lucky at slaughter time, and the endless blessed barrels of grain. Oats become porridge, barley becomes ale, rye becomes more bread if your teeth can manage it. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were disastrously poor or surprisingly adequate. Some records show chronic malnutrition. Others describe people living into old age with all their teeth. Likely, it depended on the village, the weather, and how clever your grandmother was with a soup pot. Your main drink is ale, not because you want to start the day tipsy, but because water in winter is dangerous. It freezes, harbors illness, and tastes like swamp bottom. Ale, on the other hand, is boiled in the brewing, mildly antiseptic, and just strong enough to make you forget your socks are damp. You drink from a wooden cup carved years ago by your uncle. It's lopsided and carries the faint taste of every stew it's ever met. Still, it's yours. Some mornings, if the stars have aligned and someone in the house remembered to trap a hare, you get meat. Not a haunch of roasted venison, let's not get medieval HBO about this, but a thin stew with floating scraps that were once muscle. You chew with reverence. The youngest child eats first. Not because of any rule, but because she's the fastest. You try to smile as she slurps her soup and wipes her nose with her sleeve. It's practically a napkin. You remember feast days, oh how glorious they were. Bread with honey, cheese not flecked with blue, On one saint's day you had a sausage, you still think about that sausage. Now, in deepest winter, meals become communal efforts. You trade a jar of pickled beets for your neighbor's smoked trout. You borrow salt. You share leeks. It's not generosity exactly, it's mutually assured starvation. Everyone gives a little, so no one freezes with an empty stomach. Your cooking implements are simple. One pot, one knife, one big wooden spoon that doubles as a disciplinary tool. The hearth isn't so much a kitchen as a center of gravity. You squat next to it, stir gently, and hope the coals stay hot. There are no plates, just trenchers, thick slices of old bread that absorb whatever lands on them. When they're too soggy to lift, the dog gets them. The dog, of course, eats better than some people. To thicken stews, you add peasant tricks. A handful of crushed acorns maybe, some flour if there's any left, stale ale, and always turnips. So many turnips you've started to dream in shades of beige. The older folk insist on certain rituals. Salt in the pot before anything else. Stir widdershins during a full moon. Don't let children whistle near the stew, it invites mischief. You follow most of these, half out of habit, half because you still remember that cursed soup from 3 winters ago. Even dessert exists in a fashion. You once made a sort of pudding from oats, dried apples, and bacon fat. It was memorable. The kids still talk about it like a fairy tale, the night the porridge was sweet. Food is also memory. You remember your mother's broth, thick with lentils. You remember your uncle roasting chestnuts. You remember hiding a loaf in the thatch to keep it safe during a lean week. It worked except for the part where a squirrel found it first. Every peasant knows the rules of scarcity. If you don't eat now, you'll dream of food later. If you eat too much, the family suffers. So you learn balance. You learn to feel grateful for lukewarm gruel. Today, lunch will be much like breakfast and supper will be thinner still. But you don't complain. Complaining burns calories. At least you're not nobility. Those people can't go a day without sugared almonds or peacock on a platter. You, on the other hand, have mastered the art of getting full on fumes and prayer. By the end of the day, the stew pot will be empty. You'll scrape the sides with your bread, wipe your fingers on your tunic, and sit back, belly not full but not empty either. And when your child asks if there's more, you'll smile and say, tomorrow, because there always has to be a tomorrow. You reach for the axe with a sigh that sends a puff of white breath into the morning air. It's time to chop wood again. Always chopping, always stacking, always chasing the fantasy of a house that doesn't breathe cold through the walls. The axe handle is smooth from years of use and slightly warped. You adjusted the head last week after it nearly flew off and decapitated the chicken coop. It wouldn't have been the worst loss. Honestly, the hens have stopped laying since the frost set in, but still, decapitation is best avoided. Out back, the woodpile looms like a promise and a threat. You never have enough. Not in December, not in March. The fire eats logs with a hunger matched only by toddlers, and once you run out, you're stuck burning peat, straw, even old dung bricks that make the whole cottage smell like medieval sadness. You wedge a log upright and swing. The axe bites, splits, lands with a dull crack that echoes into the trees. You set another and another. This is the rhythm of survival. Swing, split, stack. You don't think, you just move. Your fingers go stiff, your breath catches, and somewhere around the 5th log, you can no longer tell if it's sweat or melting frost sliding down your spine. Historians still debate how much wood the average peasant used in winter. Some say several cords were needed to keep a hearth going all season. Others suggest families rationed so strictly that rooms never truly warmed, just hovered slightly above freezing, like a disappointed God's idea of mercy. Inside the fire is your most prized possession. It lives in the center of your single-room home, contained in a shallow stone hearth. There's no chimney, Smoke drifts up and out or sometimes just lingers and settles into your lungs. If you're lucky, the draft works. If not, your eyes water for hours and everything tastes faintly of campfire. You remember once letting the fire die by accident. It was your first winter married. Your wife cried. You both stayed up all night blowing on twigs and praying for a miracle. In the end, you borrowed embers from a neighbor, cradled in a clay pot, and carried like a sacred relic. That was the last time you forgot the fire. Once the wood is chopped, it must be stacked, not just in piles, but smart piles crisscrossed for air, sloped for runoff, angled to deflect the worst of the wind. Your father taught you that. Stack wrong, he used to mutter, and you'll die warm but squashed. Some folks get clever. They hollow out old tree trunks, store logs inside like squirrels. Others carve out a space beneath the eaves, draping leather over the openings to keep the snow at bay. You, personally, hide your best logs under your bed. Your wife hates it, your back hates it, but come February, you'll be the warmest man on the floor. Firewood is currency in winter. You can trade it for eggs, favors, even the good ale if someone's particularly desperate. But you trade sparingly, because wood is also hope. Every log is another hour you won't shiver. There's a trick to choosing good firewood. Alder burns fast, oak burns slow. Pine pops and throws sparks, so you save it for mornings when the noise is a comfort. You learned the hard way never to burn green wood. It hisses, smokes, and leaves you colder than when you started. Sometimes you gather kindling from the forest's edge. Not deep there are wolves, and once you saw a bear's track the size of your head, but close enough to find twigs, bark, and the occasional deadfall. You whisper thanks to the trees, or maybe just to yourself. You've tried peat once or twice when the wood ran low. It works in a pinch, smells terrible, turns the pot black, but heat is heat. When desperate, there's always straw twisted into tight bundles and burned slowly, or dung mixed with clay and dried in little cakes. Your mother swore by them. Your children wrinkle their noses. You nod sagely and keep adding logs to the fire. Every so often, the thatch above the hearth catches a bit of spark. Not enough to burn down the house usually. Just a little excitement to break up the monotony. You keep a jug of water nearby, and a prayer to Saint Florian, patron of chimney fires and nervous peasants. You sometimes wonder what it would be like to have a chimney, a real one, with bricks and a flue and smoke that leaves through a door instead of your nostrils. You saw one once in a traveling merchant's sketchbook. It looked impossible, glorious, clean. But for now, you'll settle for warm toes and a roof that only leaks on one side. Back inside, the fire crackles. The pot simmers. The children huddle close, their shadows flickering on the wall. You toss on another log and sigh. You've made it through another day, and tonight at least, the house won't freeze. You open the door well, the flap of burlap stretched across the frame, and immediately step in something soft, warm, and suspiciously alive. It oinks. Yes, the pig is indoors again. So are the chickens. The goat is tied in the corner, eyeing you with that smug horizontal pupil stare, and somewhere near the hearth, a pile of straw twitches in a way that strongly suggests it contains either a cat, a dog, or your second cousin Jeff. Welcome to Winter Livestock Management, Medieval Peasant Edition. In the warmer months, animals sleep outside or in separate shelters, but winter changes everything. Frost can kill a hen overnight. A sick pig is a financial disaster, so when the cold hits hard, the barn moves in with you. Your house, small to begin with, now serves triple duty as living space, barn, and hay-scented sauna. The animals contribute heat valuable, if slightly fragrant, and provide a kind of company. You've had more meaningful conversations with the cow than with some of your in-laws. Historians still argue how widespread this practice was. Some claim that all but the wealthiest peasants shared space with their livestock. Others suggest it was more common in regions with harsher winters or less available timber for proper animal shelters. Either way, your current arrangement is crowded, noisy, and to your eternal dismay oddly comforting. The pig technically has a corner. You built a low fence of woven wattle to keep her in, but she steps over it whenever she wants. She likes to nap by the hearth, occasionally grunting when you stir the stew too loudly. You suspect she dreams in root vegetables. The chickens roost on a beam overhead. Their droppings hit the floor with the regularity of a church bell. You've tried laying straw, tried cleaning daily, even tried training them to go outside. The chickens, as always, are unimpressed. The goat's presence is temporary, just until the roof of the shed is mended. You've been saying that for 6 weeks. She eats everything. She once took a bite out of your cloak while you were still wearing it. You're not entirely sure you didn't deserve it. Your wife, practical as ever, sweeps up droppings with a resigned hum. The kids, meanwhile, love it. They treat the cow as a warm, slightly furry climbing toy. You tell them to stop. You told your parents the same thing when you were their age. They didn't listen either. There's a hierarchy to the animals. The pig is royalty. She'll be meat one day, if you don't get too attached. The goat is a necessary evil. The cow is sacred, not in a religious sense, but because she gives milk, and milk in winter is gold. You whisper apologies every time you bump her during the night. To make space, you've rearranged the beds. One child now sleeps under the loom. Another curls up next to the firewood stack. You yourself sleep wedged between a straw pallet and a very snuggly sheep. It's not ideal, but it's warm. You remember one winter when your uncle tried to house 2 pigs indoors. The smell alone drove 3 of his children to seek refuge with the priest. They came back speaking Latin and swearing off bacon. There are practical upsides. Having animals indoors means you can check on them easily. No trudging out in snow to see if a fox got into the henhouse. No icy fingers while milking. And if something goes wrong, say, a birth or an illness, you're right there to handle it. Of course, it also means stepping on hooves in the dark, and waking to the aroma of steaming manure, and once, memorably, finding a goose in your bed. The animals don't seem to mind. They settle in with the same resignation you do. Winter is long, firewood is short, body heat is precious. Everyone pulls their weight, even the pig, who snores louder than your brother-in-law. You take care of them because they take care of you. Eggs in the morning, milk for the children, occasionally a warm flank to lean against when the fire dies down. It's not affection, exactly. More like mutual dependence with occasional snout kisses. Tonight, as you settle in, the cottage creaks softly in the wind. The cow shifts, the chickens murmur, and the goat dreams of chewing boots. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and glance at the pig. She blinks slowly, you nod. It's not home the way you imagined, but it's yours, and tonight it's warm. Your fingers are still stiff from yesterday's wood chopping, and your knees ache like they've been swapped out for 2 bags of frozen barley. But there's no time to groan about it. You've got chores, and winter doesn't pause for complaining peasants. The rooster crows, or tries to. His voice cracks halfway through. He sounds as tired as you feel. Out you go again, back into the brittle morning. The snow is thin today, patchy and glinting with ice where it's melted and refrozen. Your boots crunch over the frost. You pause to rub your hands together, blow a little warmth into your palms, and then trudge toward the corner of the yard where the tools are kept. First task, mucking out the byre. That's the space where your cow and goat spend their nights if they're not already inside the house. The byre is dank, musty, and filled with straw that's been generously blessed by livestock. You grab the pitchfork and start turning it over, layer by unpleasant layer. The steam rises in little ghostly tendrils as you work. You'd think the smell would fade, but no, it's as fresh as ever. This is winter, not quiet, not restful, but labor-intensive in slow motion. Historians still argue how grueling peasant winters really were. Some suggest it was a time of reduced agricultural labor, a season of rest compared to harvest and planting. Others argue persuasively that winter was simply a different kind of busy, endless maintenance, repairs, and animal care, all without the benefit of sunlight or warmth. You're firmly in the different kind of busy camp. After the buyer, it's time to check the tools. Your hoe has a splinter in the handle. The rake needs readying. You carry them back to the shed, where the air is thick with the scent of dried leather, old wood, and mouse droppings. You sit on a stool, knife in hand, and begin shaving down the handle. This is meditative work in a way. Your breath fogs in the cold air, and the sound of your blade against the grain is the only thing that breaks the silence. Occasionally, a child yells in the distance or a goat bleats. You keep carving. Some repairs are quick tightening a strap, reshaping a wooden wedge. Others are more ambitious, patching a hole in the roof, for instance, or reinforcing the barn door so it doesn't rattle open in every gust of wind. You put those off for now. It's too cold to climb the ladder, and besides, you're still recovering from the last time you fell off. Next up, water. The village well is a short walk away, but short is relative when the wind slaps your face like an angry fishwife. You haul 2 buckets, each lined with cloth to stop them from icing over too fast. The well's surface is frozen, so you use the iron pole to break through the crust. The crack echoes like a church bell. You shiver, draw the water, and mutter a quick prayer that the buckets don't spill on the way home. Back in the cottage, your wife is darning socks, those few that aren't already more whole than fabric. The children are gathering kindling. Even your mother-in-law, half-blind and bent like a question mark, is unraveling old cloth to weave into new rope. Everyone works, everyone contributes. You glance over at the loom in the corner. It's been idle since late autumn, but now and then your wife throws on a new thread and mutters about spring linen. You nod encouragingly. Linen in spring sounds like a dream or a joke. Outside again. You haul manure to the compost pile, though no one calls it that. It's just the place where filth turns into dirt again. You cover it with straw and mutter about your back. No one hears. No one needs to. There's also the matter of the fence. The snow hides its damage, but you know from experience that a missing slat invites trouble. So you shuffle along the perimeter, hammering loose nails and replacing broken twigs. The whole thing is more hope than structure, but it keeps the goats in, which is more than you can say for your cousin Edric. By the time midday arrives, your hands are raw, your boots soaked through, and your stomach is growling. You head inside for a bowl of stew and a moment near the fire. The pig shifts to let you sit, which is more courtesy than you get from most humans. Even lunch is a kind of chore. The pot has to be stirred, bowls cleaned, and spoons re-whittled when they start splintering. You find yourself sanding one down absent-mindedly while chewing, multitasking medieval style. You rest briefly, just enough to get feeling back in your fingers. Then it's time for more repairs. The roof needs patching. Again the bucket leaks. The sled you use to haul firewood is losing a runner. Your body hurts in quiet, familiar places. Your hands are rough, your legs sore. But there's a strange pride in it too. These chores are your rhythm, your pulse through the frozen days. Evening arrives early in winter. The sun sets with a sigh, and your tools vanish into the dusk like old friends. You stack them away carefully. A tool misplaced is a chore doubled tomorrow. As the fire flickers to life and the animals shuffle into sleep, you stretch your back and wipe your hands on your tunic. The cottage smells of smoke, stew, and something vaguely livestockish. You take a deep breath. You're tired, always, but tired means you worked. Tired means you're still going. And in the quiet, just before night swallows the last light from the doorway, you feel something like satisfaction. The wind has picked up again tonight, howling around the edges of your thatched roof like a hungry ghost. The moon is thin, half hidden by clouds, and inside your home the light flickers with the fire, casting dancing shadows over walls streaked with soot and time. The air is full of creaks and rustles, some wood, some animal, some imagination. You're not afraid exactly, but let's just say you understand why people believe in spirits this time of year. Evening in winter isn't just dark, it's long. The sun slips away by mid-afternoon, and the night stretches for what feels like forever. It's during these long, cold evenings that your world gets smaller. You gather closer to the hearth, speak in whispers, and begin to feel the weight of stories passed down like heirlooms. Your grandmother used to say winter was the saints' season, the time when the holy dead walked the hills, checking on the faithful. You believed her, mostly because she told the story while stirring porridge, and no one lies during porridge. You light a tallow candle, careful not to use too much wick. These things don't grow on trees, or rather they do, but only indirectly, via sheep. Tallow candles smell like a butcher's apron, but they do the job, better than pitch torches or resin lumps, which smoke too much and sometimes explode. Yes, explode. Ask your cousin about his eyebrows. So what do you do during these endless nights? You talk mostly, or listen. The stories return like migrating birds. Tonight it might be the tale of the old woman in the woods who sold warm hands for the price of your shadow, or the monk who kept a tame owl that could smell lies. Historians still debate how much medieval peasants truly believed in the supernatural. Some argue it was all symbolic, a way to explain natural forces. Others insist these beliefs were as real as frostbite. What's certain is that when you spend half your life in the cold dark, your imagination becomes a kind of insulation. You cross yourself when the wind moans just right. Old habits, superstitions, the idea that spirits ride the breeze, or that St. Nicholas himself passes judgment from behind the northern stars. It's not about fear, it's about context, about knowing your place in a universe where wolves wear cloaks and witches steal warmth. Sometimes you sing. Not loudly, your voice carries too far in the cold, but soft hymns, or the lullabies your mother hummed while spinning. The fire crackles in response, the pig snores, the chickens shift overhead. Your wife pulls out her spindle and begins to spin thread by firelight. It's slow, rhythmic work, and you find yourself lulled by the motion. The children play at her feet, stacking pebbles or pretending a wooden spoon is a knight. They giggle, one farts. The sanctity of silence is ruined, but no one minds. You remember being their age, drawing pictures in the soot with a stick, listening as your uncle recounted the story of the midwinter king, the one who slept beneath the fields and rose only when the last snow melted. He was supposed to bring spring with him, unless someone forgot to light the three-night candle, which, you suspect, someone always forgot. The darkness presses in like a heavy cloak, but it's not unkind. It wraps around you. You lean into it. Shadows stretch across the walls in familiar shapes. You swear one of them looks like a saint's profile or a turnip. It's hard to tell in candlelight. Eventually, someone mentions the spirits outside, just casually. As in, make sure the latch is tight, we don't want the old ones slipping in. Everyone laughs, but the latch does get double-checked. There's a tradition in your village of placing a small offering outside on certain nights, a crust of bread, a splash of ale, sometimes a coin. It's not bribery exactly, more like polite acknowledgement. We see you, the gesture says. We're doing our best. Please don't haunt the goat. You think of saints too. Saints are safer than spirits. Saint Cuthbert, who once warmed his frozen hands by hugging a sheep. Saint Lucy, whose feast day always falls when the nights feel longest. You light a second candle in her name, just for luck. The night drifts on. The stories run out. The children nod off one by one, draped in cloaks and tucked into straw. Your wife stretches, her spindle set aside. You poke the fire and listen to the coals whisper secrets in a language only embers know. Somewhere far off a dog barks once, sharply. You listen, nothing follows, just the wind again. You close your eyes. The flicker of the fire plays on your lids. You picture the spirits dancing outside, harmless, curious, wrapped in frost and tradition. It's not fear that lingers, it's respect. For the dark, for the cold, for the quiet magic of a winter night that stretches on and somehow doesn't break you. You shift your weight slightly and groan not from pain exactly, but from geometry. There are too many people in this bed. There are always too many people in this bed. It's night again, and the fires burn down to a soft red eye in the hearth. You lie curled like a question mark, pressed against your wife, a child draped across your hip, and at least one bony elbow poking into your spine. You think it might belong to your niece, or the pig. You're honestly too tired to check. This is medieval sleeping, not private, not spacious, but undeniably warm. Beds for the peasant class are flexible affairs. Some families have one large straw-stuffed mattress for everyone. Others make do with blankets on benches, bundles of hay or furs laid straight on the floor. You've cobbled together a frame from branches, lashed together with stubborn twine, and stuffed the bedding with everything from hay to old linens to one suspiciously crunchy blanket you never question anymore. During the winter, everyone piles in. Body heat is currency. You've readjusted your expectations of personal space. If someone isn't breathing near your ear, they're too far away. Historians still argue about medieval sleeping habits. Did people sleep through the night or in two phases? Some sources suggest first sleep and second sleep were common, waking around midnight for prayer, tea, or a quick trip to the bushes. Others argue peasants were too tired to follow patterns at all and simply collapsed for as long as darkness allowed. You suspect both are true. Some nights you wake around midnight and lie there in the glow of dying coals, listening to the breathing around you. 3 children, 1 wife, maybe the goat rustling in her sleep. You don't always get up, but when you do, you enjoy the quiet. The world feels paused, even the lice seem to take a break. Speaking of lice, yes, they're here. They're always here. You comb your hair with a bone pick once a week, more often if your wife gets fussy. Everyone in the bed scratches at some point in the night. You've reached the stage where it's more lullaby than nuisance. The bedsheets are non-existent. You have layers, a wool blanket, a coarse linen sheet more whole than cloth, and an old fur cloak with a history longer than your own. The smell is robust, to put it kindly, a mix of sweat, wood smoke, and goat suggestions. Privacy is a myth. You sleep within arm's reach of everyone. Conversations continue as people drift off. Someone always snores. Your youngest has night terrors and occasionally wakes the household screaming about the bean ghost. You've all grown used to it. You rotate sleeping positions depending on illness, chores, and who had the least soup at dinner. If someone has a cough, they get the corner near the door closest to fresh air. If someone's been particularly helpful or loud, they get the warm middle. You try to avoid both. Some nights you sleep on the floor by the fire, not because it's more comfortable, it isn't, but because it's quieter and slightly warmer. You drag a few logs close, tuck a blanket under your head, and pretend you're the lord of a great hall, stretched out beneath a painted ceiling. Your wife teases you for it, but she joins you sometimes, and those are the warmest nights of all. On feast days, when relatives visit, the bed situation becomes even more chaotic. Cousins in the rafters, aunties on the grain sacks. One memorable Christmas, you had 13 people in the house, plus a lamb recovering from frostbite. You've never been closer to your brother-in-law, literally. But there's comfort here, too. A sense of being held, of sharing the dark with those you love. You've never slept alone, not really. Even on the rare occasions when you camped out in the woods or stayed late at the Lord's barn, the silence was stranger than the company. Tonight, the house settles into a symphony of sleep. A snore, a sigh, the soft shuffle of feathers above. The fire glows low. Someone mumbles in their dreams. You think you hear your name. You mutter back, a soft sound, and hope it counts as affection. In the morning, you'll wake with a crick in your neck, a goat nibbling your cloak, and at least one child draped sideways across your shins. But for now, in this moment, you are warm. And in winter, warmth is everything. It starts as a tickle, an innocent, treacherous little itch at the back of your throat. You cough once. Then again, a child across the room does the same. Your wife sighs. You're sick, or getting there. And in winter, even a sniffle can feel like a doom-laden prophecy. Colds are a near-constant companion in the medieval peasant's life. Everyone coughs. Everyone sneezes. Everyone has a perpetually dripping nose from December through March. You stopped counting the sniffles long ago. Your handkerchief, if you could call it that, is a square of coarse linen. It's reused, rinsed when convenient, and mostly ineffective. The idea of a clean, soft cloth pulled fresh from a drawer is so wildly luxurious that it might as well be part of a saint's miracle. This morning, your eldest son woke up with a nose like a faucet. His cheeks are flushed and his cough sounds like a cartwheel over gravel. You give him broth, pat his head, and send him back to the straw pile. There's nothing else to do. Historians still debate the nature of medieval sickness. Some records mention the winter ague, a general term for what we'd now call seasonal flu or colds. Others describe people succumbing to seemingly minor illnesses, likely due to poor nutrition, damp housing, and zero concept of germ theory. You've heard the village priest speak of bad humors and unbalanced phlegm. A wandering healer once tried to cure your cousin's cough by stuffing his mouth with rosemary and wrapping his feet in eel skins. It didn't work, but it made for excellent gossip. Your own remedies are simpler. Hot broth, wool socks, a rag soaked in vinegar tied around the forehead, garlic when you have it, ale when you don't. Your neighbor swears by drinking boiled onion water while chanting 3 Ave Marias. Your wife prefers mustard poultices, which smell like defeat and stables but seem to help. You've tried both. You're still sick. The worst part is the constant chill. Once the cold gets into your bones, it lingers. You lie under blankets with the fire crackling, but you can't shake the feeling that your marrow itself is shivering. You curl tighter, tuck your hands into your sleeves, and breathe through your mouth when your nose rebels. Sometimes, the illnesses deepen. Your aunt developed a rattling cough one winter, and never got better. She faded slowly, like the coals in a fire that no one remembers to stoke. You keep thinking of her when you hear your son's wheeze in the dark. You've developed a special sensitivity to sounds of sickness. A dry cough is fine. A wet cough is worrying. The silence after a cough that's terrifying. There are no doctors here. The Lord might have one several miles away, but you'd never be allowed to see him. Instead, there's old Maud, who learned her trade from her grandmother. She makes tinctures, mutters prayers, and applies salves that smell like regret and hope. You visited her last week when your neighbor's daughter fell ill. Maud looked into the girl's eyes, clucked her tongue, and prescribed onion skins boiled in milk. The girl got better, or she would have anyway, no one's quite sure. There's also the spiritual side. When illness lingers, your wife lights a candle for Saint Sebastian, patron of plagues and arrow-related misfortunes. Your youngest daughter insists on whispering to the fire at night, so the sickness won't hear her sleep. You let her. It doesn't hurt. Tonight the cottage echoes with a chorus of coughs. The air smells of tallow, turnips, and thyme. You press a warm cloth to your chest and try to relax. The pig sneezes. It's oddly comforting. You reach for your cup of spiced ale, not too strong, just enough to dull the ache in your head. You sip slowly. Your wife wraps an extra shawl around your shoulders. Her fingers linger for a moment. You murmur thanks. It's these moments in the stillness between wheezes that you find a strange peace. You're sick, the kids are sick, even the goat looks under the weather, but you're together, you're trying. You close your eyes and listen to the fire. Outside the wind howls. Inside someone snores. You drift, not into sleep exactly, but into a kind of winter trance, drowsy, aching, wrapped in warmth and wool and the sheer will to get better. And you know, somehow, you will. The year may be dark and the air may bite, but tonight the cottage glows. A single lantern hangs near the door, casting a golden puddle across the threshold. The hearth crackles with extra wood. The stew smells marginally less turnipy, and most miraculous of all, someone opened the good ale. It's a feast night, a rare gem embedded in the bleak stretch of winter. You don't remember exactly which saint is being honored, possibly one with a name like Wulfstan or Wigbert, but no one seems to care. The point is, for one night, the rules loosen, the gloom lifts, and everyone gets a second bowl of stew. There's music too. Not a harp or lute, don't be ridiculous, but your cousin has a bone whistle, and someone's drumming on a turned-over bucket. The rhythm is patchy, but you tap your foot anyway. It's been weeks since you danced, and your joints complain, but your spirit is willing. Historians still argue whether these midwinter feasts were pagan traditions wrapped in Christian names, or simply acts of defiance against the darkness. Either way, they served a vital purpose, to remind everyone that life existed beyond surviving, that warmth, laughter, and the good ale were worth preserving. The ale itself is cloudy, brown, and potent. You sip slowly, partly out of caution, partly because your mug has a leak, and you have to tilt it just right to avoid wet socks. Your wife laughs at something the midwife says. The kids play a game with beans and an upside-down shoe. Your uncle is telling the same joke he tells every feast night, about the time a bishop mistook a goose for a choir boy. It wasn't funny last year, but tonight it gets a real chuckle. You bring out your most treasured dish, a small wheel of smoked cheese you've been saving since late autumn. You slice it thin, savoring every crumb. It tastes like firewood, salt, and happiness. Even the pig looks celebratory. Someone tied a ribbon around her middle, and she seems unbothered by it. Snuffling contentedly near the stew pot, you give her a peel of apple and feel generous. There are rules to a good feast, not written ones, nothing so formal, but rules everyone knows. First, no chores. If the fire goes out, tough luck. Second, everyone gets something special, even if that something is just an extra slice of bread. Third, sing even badly, especially badly. It's part of the charm. You raise your voice in a sleepy chant. The words are half Latin, half nonsense, passed down from your grandfather who probably made them up while mildly drunk. No one minds. The melody winds its way around the room like smoke. Your neighbor brings in a dish of preserved pears, sticky with syrup and clove. They're astonishingly good, and vanish in seconds. You trade him a scoop of your wife's barley pudding in return. His eyebrows lift. The pudding includes cinnamon. You are instantly more popular than usual. Children pass around a candle stub and take turns making wishes into it. One wishes for more snow, one for spring, one for a chicken that doesn't bite. You wish for health, and maybe more cheese. The midwife begins telling a story, the one about the winter elf who braids horse manes into knots if you forget to sweep. She's told it 100 times, but tonight it feels new again. The children lean in, wide-eyed. You sip your ale and enjoy the warmth of tradition. Your wife catches your eye across the room. Her smile is small but real. You nod. She nods back. This moment, this warm, crowded, noisy moment is everything. Later, when the fire is low and the mugs are empty, you help gather up the bowls. The children are asleep in a pile near the wall, one still holding a bean from the game. The pig is also asleep, ribbon askew. You toss on another log. It hisses but catches. You stretch your legs and feel, for the first time in weeks, something close to joy. The cold is still out there. The snow hasn't melted. But tonight you've laughed, you've eaten well. You've remembered that you are not just a survivor, you're a participant. Tomorrow, the chores return. But tonight, you drift into sleep with the taste of spice on your tongue, the rhythm of the whistle in your ears, and a warmth in your chest that has nothing to do with the fire. By late winter, you've memorized the shape of every soot streak on the wall. The hours between dusk and dawn stretch long and repetitive, like a song with too many verses. The days, though filled with work, bleed together, and in those rare hours when the chores are done and the children are asleep, you ask yourself, what now? Because surviving the cold is one thing. Surviving the boredom, that's a whole different kind of battle. You pass the time as best you can. One favorite pastime is gossip. Glorious, slow-bubbling, deeply embellished gossip. Someone's cousin stole a chicken. Someone's goat is looking suspiciously plump. The miller's wife, it is whispered, has taken to talking to the well. You lean in, you sip your ale. You add a harmless detail or two. You remember when your sister claimed the priest's cloak was woven from angel hair. It wasn't, but the story lasted 3 winters. Games come next. Not the fancy games of lords, no chess, no gilded dice. You play with beans, pebbles, sticks. There's one game involving tossing dried sheep knuckles and trying to land them upright. It's surprisingly competitive. You've lost a toenail over it. Historians still debate what games peasants really played. Artifacts show everything from wooden dolls to board games etched in stone. Some believe storytelling games were most common, pass the story, riddles, and tall tales that evolve each time they're told. You've definitely been part of those. Your version of The Boy Who Married a Turnip is legendary. The children invent games from whatever's around. A crooked spoon becomes a knight. A cracked bowl is a shield. They stage battles on the packed dirt floor, complete with dramatic deaths and triumphant pig squeals. You cheer. You award invisible medals. You remind them not to use real fire this time. Crafts help pass the hours, too. You carve a new spoon from a block of ashwood, even though no one really needs another spoon. Your wife embroiders half a deer before declaring it a sheep. You nod supportively. The children draw pictures with coal on the hearthstone, some of them alarmingly accurate portraits of your grumpy neighbor. You tell stories, old ones, always the same, about the man who tried to ride a sheep across the frozen river, about the girl who grew a beard in winter and became mayor of the hens, stories that get sillier, warmer, more familiar with each retelling. Laughter becomes a form of light. A shared joke glows in the gloom, stretching your spirits just a bit farther. You once laughed so hard you cried over the simple phrase, duck leggings. You can't remember why it was funny, only that it was. You sing sometimes. Not in tune, not even in time, but you sing. Your voice is scratchy, the lyrics are patchy, but your daughter joins in, and then your wife, and soon the whole family is croaking out a half-remembered harvest tune as if it's the only thing holding winter at bay. Your neighbor once tried to build a puppet theater from sticks and an old cloak. It collapsed mid-performance. The audience applauded anyway. There's a special game you save for the bleakest nights. You call it, What Would You Do If You Were Lord? It starts with basic wishes, warm boots, bread with honey, a second shirt. But it grows grander, feasts every week, a tiled floor, maybe a cow who talks. You get creative. You dream together. You don't need much, just a flicker of something else, something beyond the chores and the cold and the stew that never ends. Sometimes you just sit and think. You watch the fire. You let your thoughts drift like smoke. You imagine warmer places, or the sea, or the time your grandfather claimed he rode a swan to market. Probably a goose, definitely not a swan. Your wife, watching you daydream, gently taps your foot. Don't fall in, she says, meaning don't drift too far into that other world. You smile. She's right. You stay tethered, just enough. Eventually, the The fire dims, the shadows grow, and the night resumes its quiet rule. You yawn, stretch, and nudge the sleeping child beside you. They mumble about turnips and roll over. Another evening down, another night survived, and in the small, silly, sleepy moments you remember, even the dullest winters are full of life. You're out of candles, your boots are damp, and the corner of your cloak is frozen into a shape that defies nature and tailoring. It's a perfect time for some peasant ingenuity. Being poor in winter isn't just hard, it's creatively demanding. You can't buy your way out of the cold. You can only think your way out of it, using the stuff around you and the collective wisdom of ancestors who probably also complained about their cloaks. You begin with your feet. Your left boot has a hole the size of a mouse, which is coincidentally the size of the mouse that probably chewed it. Socks are for rich people. You use hay slippers, handfuls of dry grass stuffed into your boots and wrapped in linen scraps. It sounds awful. It is awful, but it's warm. When the hay gets too soggy, you replace it. You keep a bundle near the hearth specifically for this. Your wife calls it the foot pantry. Your shirt has seen better years, so you sew patches over patches, layer tunics, and when desperate, tuck heated stones into your waistband. Just small ones. The large ones leave marks and painful memories. The windows, if you have them, are nothing more than oiled cloth stretched across a wooden frame. They let in light and most of the cold. You hang animal hides over them during storms, pinning them in place with bones sharpened into makeshift hooks. It helps, marginally. The fire is your biggest asset, and you treat it like royalty. You use clay balls warmed in the coals during the day, then wrapped in wool and placed in the bed at night. They radiate warmth for hours, unless someone steals yours, which happens a lot. Historians still debate how much technology medieval peasants really had. Some argue it was all brute endurance. Others highlight clever tools, foot warmers, clay stoves, shuttered lanterns. The truth, as usual, sits somewhere between smoke and soot. You once built a hand warmer out of a tin cup filled with hot ash and sealed with a bit of waxed leather. It singed your sleeve but warmed your fingers for hours. You've also tried wrapping cabbage leaves around your shins under your hose. That one didn't catch on. The toilet situation, still bleak. But you've mastered the chamber pot hustle, sprint outside, dump quickly, return before your face freezes. When the ground is too hard to dig, you mark a snowbank with charcoal so you don't trip into it later. It's an art. To light your home without wasting precious candles, you line a bowl with sheep fat and float a wick in it homemade tallow lamp. It sputters, stinks, and smokes, but gives off enough glow to find your mittens, which is the main goal. You've also learned to use what the land gives, moss for padding, nettle fiber spun into emergency thread, pine cones split open to start a stubborn fire. You even made a spoon from a cracked ladle and the handle of a broken rake. It works, mostly. Your neighbor uses a plank of wood as a snow shovel. It works great until the snow turns to slush, at which point he just gives up and yells at it. You mend everything. Buttons are replaced with carved pegs or knots. Tears are patched with waxed thread and stories. When your cloak's clasp broke, you tied it with twine, then added a bead so it looked intentional. It fooled no one, but they admired your effort. For water, when the well freezes, you melt snow in a black pot over the fire. The trick is to keep it from tasting like soot. Your wife claims adding a sprig of thyme helps. You're unconvinced, but you pretend to taste the difference. On especially cold days, you hotbox the house. Everyone gathers close, the fire is stoked high, and the door is blocked with sacks. You stay there until the air grows thick and steamy, and someone inevitably passes out from the warmth. It's glorious. The children get involved too. They've invented a game called Who Can Wear the Most Layers. The current record is 8 tunics, 3 hoods, and a single mitten worn as a hat. And then, of course, there's the blanket tent strategy. You drape cloaks over benches, Crawl inside with a candle and a sibling and pretend it's a castle. A very flammable castle, but warm. You do what you must. You stitch, you stack, you hoard dry sticks like currency, and in the middle of the longest, coldest nights, you wrap up tight, press your hands to your clay stove, and smile. Because even in a world with no central heat, no wool-lined boots, and no electric kettle, you've managed to outsmart the cold. For another day, at least. There's a silence to late winter that you've learned not to trust. It hangs over the village like a damp wool cloak, muffling the crunch of snow and the clink of your firewood pile. It's too still, too perfect, and that's when you hear it. A howl. Low, distant, and followed by another, higher and closer. The wolves are back. You freeze, half bent over a bundle of kindling. The air tightens. You glance toward the woods at the edge of the field. Nothing, yet. This isn't the first time. It won't be the last. Wolves don't usually bother the village. They're shy, skittish, and fond of easier prey. But winter is long, and hunger makes fools of every creature. When the snow's deep and the rivers are frozen, even the forest gets desperate. Historians still argue whether wolf attacks in medieval Europe were common or just exaggerated through folklore. Some records describe terrifying packs stalking villages, while others suggest most wolves stayed far from humans and less provoked. You personally lean toward caution. You call to your wife quietly. She nods, grabs the children, and begins the practiced steps of nighttime lockdown, animals into the house again. Door barred, fire stoked bright, knives placed near the hearth not for real use, just in case. You remember last winter when a wolf snatched a chicken from your neighbor's co-op. Broad daylight. The feathers scattered like snowflakes. You and 4 others tracked it to the edge of the forest, saw its prints in the fresh powder, huge, clawed, impossibly close. Then the tracks vanished into the pines and the trail went cold. You're not a hunter. You're a survivor. There's a difference. The children are frightened. You soothe them with an old story about Saint Blaise, who once calmed a wolf by feeding it porridge and whispering Latin lullabies. They believe you. Mostly, your youngest insists on leaving out a crust of bread by the door, just in case the wolf is a nice one. The pig, annoyingly, doesn't seem concerned. She grunts, settles deeper into her blanket pile, and sighs. You envy her. You go over the checklist again. The shutter over the smoke hole is closed, the co-op is reinforced, and the goat who insists on standing sentinel is tied inside. She bleats softly, as if daring the forest to try something. Then comes the sound again, closer, a sharp yip echoed by a chorus of low growls. You stand by the window flap, clutching your cloak tighter. Through the blurred oilcloth you see nothing, but you feel something watching. Your wife sits near the fire, whispering a protective charm under her breath. You don't ask what language it's in. Some things don't need translation. The wolves don't come to the door. They never do. But you hear them all night pacing, sniffing, testing the edges of the village. Once or twice something brushes the wall. Once the chickens clatter in their roost and settle only after a long silence. You stay awake, half dozing, ears attuned to every creak, crackle, and crunch. Some say wolves are a punishment, that when a village forgets its duties or burns the wrong herb on St. Lucy's feast, the wolves come. Others say they're just animals, big, cold, and hungry. Your grandmother used to say, "A wolf never knocks twice." You're still not sure what she meant. She died in the spring, peacefully, in her sleep, after feeding a wolf-shaped shadow outside her window, or so the story goes. At dawn the air is thin and still. You step outside carefully, clutching a torch. There are tracks in the snow, dozens, maybe more, deep, sharp prints with claw marks. They loop around the house, around the chicken coop, around your woodpile. And then just vanish into the trees. You don't speak, not yet. You just exhale and feel your breath ghost into the frozen air. Later, you'll tell the neighbors. You'll patch the fence again. You'll say something brave sounding, But for now, you just look at the snow, and the dark smudge where a paw print pressed too close to your door. And you whisper, not a prayer exactly, but something like thanks. Thanks that once again, it was just a night of sounds. And not the night the wolves came in. There's snow on your boots and dread in your belly, because no matter how cold the wind gets or how deep the drifts pile up, one thing never freezes: taxes. Today is collection day. You tug your scarf tighter and cast a mournful glance at the hearth, where your family huddles like spoons in a drawer. The fire crackles softly, unaware that you're about to leave it for a journey best described as unpleasant and preventable in a just universe. In your satchel, one jug of ale, a wheel of cheese the size of a toddler's fist, and a chicken you don't like very much. This is your offering, your rent, your tithe, your share of the kingdom's perpetual appetite. Historians still debate the specifics of peasant taxation. Some say rents were seasonal. Others argue that dues were scattered unpredictably across feast days, saint days, and vague concepts like obligation. You don't care. All you know is that if you don't pay, bad things happen. Fields are seized, oxen vanish. You're reminded firmly. And so you trudge. The Lord's Manor is 2 miles uphill, and the path is a slick ribbon of slush, mud, and questionable horse prints. You shoulder your satchel, squint into the wind, and start walking. The chicken complains immediately. She does not share your sense of civic duty. You pass 3 neighbors along the way, each with their own awkward bundle. One carries a sack of beans and a suspiciously limp rabbit. Another has 3 geese tied together by their feet. The third, old Tom, simply waves and mutters about giving them my good mood this year. You reach the manor gate where a bored steward with a nose redder than frostbitten turnips checks your name against a damp list. You're there. Of course you are. Inside, the hall is warm and smells faintly of baked apples and economic disparity. You hand over your goods with a neutral expression. The steward weighs your cheese, sniffs your ale, and pokes the chicken, who clucks indignantly and pecks his thumb. You wait awkwardly while he tallies your offering. Then he nods. That'll do. No fanfare, no receipt, just the unspoken agreement that for now you've kept your place in the world. You leave quickly, before anyone changes their mind. Outside again, the wind slaps your face like a disapproving ant, but your steps are lighter. The chicken, now free, runs in the opposite direction with an energy she never showed in your care. You sigh. The return trip is slower, partly because the road has turned into a muddy chute, partly because your shoulders ache from clenching against injustice, but mostly because you're trying to avoid slipping into the thought spiral that usually follows tax day. You start thinking, what if you didn't pay? What if just once you said no? But then you remember the story of the peasant who hid his pig to avoid a tithe, and woke up the next morning to find his house full of angry monks and no roof. Instead, you fantasize about living somewhere warm, or being a goose, or inheriting a fortune from a mysterious merchant uncle who's never existed but might, just might, turn up one day. Back in the village, others return from their own grim pilgrimages. There are nods, shrugs, and the occasional muttered curse. One man tries to sell you a tax-free pie. You decline. Last year's pie turned out to be turnips and despair in a crust. Your wife meets you at the door with a hug and a mug of broth. The children want to know where the chicken went. You say she ran away to be free. They cheer. You let them believe it. That night, as the fire crackles and the stew bubbles and your cloak dries near the coals, you lean back and sigh. You did it, you paid, you're safe. For now. Until spring rent, or Michaelmas, or the next Lord's whim. But tonight you eat, you breathe, you stretch your toes toward the fire. And for one small fleeting moment, you feel rich. You wake to silence, and that's never a good sign. The cottage is too quiet. No chicken clucking, No goat complaining. No sniffling child rolling over in the straw. The fire has burned low, leaving the room in a soft gray hush, and for a moment, you think just for a moment that perhaps everyone has simply stopped. Death is like that in winter, quiet, gentle, creeping in under the door like a particularly determined draft. But then the pig sneezes. The child nearest you groans and buries their head under a blanket. Your wife shifts, murmuring something about soup. You exhale. Still alive. But not everyone is so lucky. This winter has taken 3 from your village already, 2 old, 1 not so old. And every time it happens, you're reminded. Life is a thin line drawn in frost, easily smudged. You rise slowly, joints stiff, and poke at the fire. The embers blink back at you, sullen and half asleep. You add a few twigs, whisper something encouraging, and watch the flames flare up again, reluctant but obedient. Breakfast is quiet. You eat in silence, not out of reverence, but out of bone-deep fatigue. The porridge tastes like ash. You eat it anyway. Your neighbor stops by before sunrise, bundled in every tunic he owns. His breath steams as he tells you, old Elric passed in the night, in his sleep, peacefully. You nod. You expected it. He hadn't spoken in days, just stared at the fire with eyes that already seemed turned inward. You helped mend his roof last month. You wonder if he noticed. Historians often write about death in the medieval world as routine, expected, even mundane, and it's true that you're not surprised by it anymore. But normal doesn't mean easy. Every loss leaves a thread unwoven. Every death, a draft in the corner of your memory. The village bell rings once, low and slow. You wrap up and walk the half-mile to Elric's hut. Others are gathering, their faces gray in the morning light. There's no priest yet, he'll come tomorrow. Today is for wrapping the body, preparing the space, sitting with him one last time. The room smells of pine and smoke. Elric lies still, his hands folded. Someone placed a sprig of holly on his chest. You think he would have liked that. You help carry him out, wrapped in a woolen shroud, the corners tied with care. The ground is too hard to dig, so you'll keep him in the cold shed until the thaw. He's not the first to wait there. He won't be the last. Afterward, you walk home, numb in every sense. Your wife pours you a mug of ale. You sit in silence, listening to the children argue about who gets the last carrot. Life goes on, loudly, clumsily, relentlessly. That evening, you sit near the fire and think about your own place in the grand ledger. You're not old, not young, not sick, not well, just here, for now. You think about the stories you'll tell if you make it to spring. About the night the goat chewed the sermon book. About the day the pig got stuck in the stew pot. About Elric, who once danced naked on Midsummer's Eve and blamed it on mead. You smile, just a little. Your wife notices. She sets down her spindle and takes your hand. Neither of you speaks. The fire crackles. The wind whistles outside. And somewhere, in the corner of the room, death waits, not cruelly, not hungrily, just patiently, like a quiet neighbor with impeccable timing. But not tonight. Tonight you are here, you are breathing, you are warm. And that is enough. You're hunched by the hearth again, your knees drawn up, your hands wrapped in a blanket that used to be part of a curtain. Your nose is stuffed, your toes are numb, and your joints ache like you've been cursed by a particularly petty elf. It's time to pull out the winter cure chest, or more accurately, the box of dubious hope and damp herbs. In the Middle Ages, medicine is a mix of prayer, guesswork, and the enthusiastic application of garlic. You begin with the basics. Your wife reaches into her pouch of dried herbs, all carefully labeled in spidery ink. There's thyme for breathing, sage for strength, and something she swears is blessed nettle, though it smells more like old hay. She crushes a few leaves, steeps them in boiling water, and hands you the cup with the solemn air of a high priestess. You sip. It tastes like hot hedge, but it warms your hands, and for now, that's enough. There's honey in the mix, too rare and precious. You traded a pair of woolen socks for it 2 weeks ago. It coats your throat and makes you briefly believe in magic. Folk medicine is part science, part faith, and part outright storytelling. Your neighbor insists on sleeping with garlic stuffed in his nose during fevers. Another swears by whispering to her broth pot. You once saw a man tie a chicken bone to his wrist and chant to Saint Apollonia to cure a toothache. Historians still argue whether these remedies actually helped or merely distracted the sick from their misery. You lean toward the latter. Still, distraction has its place. When the children get sick, you pull out all the stops. Woolen socks are warmed near the fire and pressed to feet. A pot of steaming water, spiked with pine needles and onion skins, is placed near the bed. The vapor rises like a holy spirit. Your wife murmurs blessings, half remembered, half invented. She ties charms of rosemary and thistle above the door. The goat sneezes, and you briefly consider whether she needs a charm too. There are more serious cures, of course. For persistent coughs, you turn to oxymel, a blend of vinegar, honey, and crushed garlic. It smells like punishment and tastes like betrayal, but it clears your chest like a thunderclap. Then there's the mustard poultice, ground seeds, warmed cloth, applied to the chest until you feel like a very pungent loaf of bread. It burns. It also works, allegedly. For joint pain, your uncle used to swear by burning the ache out, heating smooth stones in the fire and pressing them to your back. He also believed this treatment cured cowardice. You tried it once. Your back never forgave you. You keep a vial of goose grease for rubbing into sore limbs. It's thick, slippery, and makes you smell like a well-loved dinner. But it helps, or maybe just distracts you from how cold your toes are. Then there's superstition. A lock of your hair, buried under the hearthstone, is supposed to keep fevers away. A cross drawn in ash above the door repels night spirits. One of your children insists that if they sleep with a pebble in each sock, the chills stay away. You let them. The placebo effect wasn't named yet, but it was alive and well. Some nights you go to bed with a candle lit, and a prayer to Saint Raphael the healing saint murmured under your breath. You've never seen him, but you like to think he's out there, occasionally checking on shivering peasants like you. You remember the time your cousin came down with winter madness, likely cabin fever, and the village women wrapped her in strips of ivy and had her sleep near the pig. She recovered. The pig never quite looked you in the eye after that. Sometimes laughter is the best medicine. Your wife tells a story about her grandfather, who treated a sore throat by holding a hot onion under his chin. When it didn't work, he blamed the onion for having too French a smell. You laugh, you cough, you laugh again. Tonight, you light a little bundle of dried lavender and hang it near the window. You breathe deep. You let the warmth of the fire and the murmur of old cures wrap around you. You're not healed, but you're holding on. And in a winter like this, that's as close as it gets to medicine. You've started talking to the icicles. It's been weeks since you saw green. The snowbanks have stopped being exciting and are now simply furniture. The firewood is lower than you'd like, and the stew pot has acquired a permanent beige tint. Every morning you step outside, sniff the air, and ask the same question: is that thaw? Not yet. But soon. Hope is a strange thing in late winter. It shows up in unlikely places: how the snow squeaks underfoot instead of crunching, how the light lingers just a few minutes longer after supper. You cling to these changes like breadcrumbs leading out of a frozen forest. There's a myth in your village about the first crow of spring. Not the bird, but the sound, a specific tone, somewhere between croak and promise. The old women say if you hear it before Candlemas, it means an early thaw. You've been listening. So far, it's just goats. You turn toward rituals to keep hope alive. Your wife sprinkles ashes in a circle around the hearth. Keeps the warmth in, she says, though you suspect it's just to keep the children from getting too close to the fire. The children, in turn, start building thaw towers out of frost-melt icicles, arranging them like sacred runes on the window ledge. When one finally falls and shatters, they cheer. Historians still puzzle over the role of seasonal myths in daily peasant life. Did they really believe the thaw came because they lit candles or hung garlic over doors, or were these just the medieval equivalent of crossing your fingers? Either way, you participate. What else is there to do? You remember your mother hanging bundles of dried flowers on the doorframe at the end of February. She called them sunlers, mostly marigold, sometimes dried apple peel. She said it reminded the sun where you lived. You make your own this year. It's scraggly but heartfelt. There's also the matter of thaw dreams. The villagers believe that in the final month of cold, you'll start dreaming of gardens. Not real ones, dream gardens, fields that stretch forever, trees that speak in warm breezes, turnips the size of barrels. You've had 3 such dreams this week. One involved a river of hot soup. You woke up chewing your sleeve. The priest says these dreams are temptation symbols of gluttony and sloth. You think maybe he just hasn't had a good dream in a while. Your wife starts sorting the seed pouch, not because planting is near, but because touching the seeds gives her something to hope with. She pours them into her hands, murmurs names bean, barley, beet, barley again, and smiles at the feel of potential. You join her one night. Together, you hold a few wrinkled kernels and imagine where they'll go. You talk about the little patch by the goat pen. Maybe this year you'll finally try leeks. Even the pig seems restless. She noses at the door, then sighs and settles down again. She's seen too many false thaws to be fooled. The children play first sign outside looking for buds, thaw lines, worms, anything. One brings you a stick with a bit of moss on it. It's happening, he shouts. You nod solemnly. It is. Your dreams grow wilder. One night you're standing in a green meadow wearing shoes made of bread. The sun is hot, your skin doesn't itch, and you can hear bees. You wake with a start, disoriented, smiling. The next day, a single droplet of water trickles from the eaves. No one says anything, but everyone sees it. And in that tiny, glistening moment, hope stops being a joke. It becomes real again. You sit by the fire that night, the thaw tower melting gently on the windowsill, and let yourself picture it. The day you step outside and don't flinch, the day the chickens lay again, the day you taste something green. You're not there yet, but soon. And sometimes soon is enough. You're chopping kindling when she shows up again, the neighbor with the warmest house in the village. Her name is Maud. No one knows exactly how old she is. She's always just been there, like the well or the big oak in the center of town. She has 3 goats, 2 grandsons, and a knack for always having dry socks. Cold enough for your knees to whisper, isn't it? She calls, leaning on your fence like a gnarled root come to life. You nod, their whispering betrayal. She laughs, then reaches into her shawl and pulls out a small bundle. Thought you could use these, she says, passing over a pair of mittens stitched from some soft, suspiciously warm material. You don't ask what it is. You're too busy jamming them onto your frozen hands with the reverence usually reserved for relics. Maud has a talent for warmth, not just literal, but emotional. She knows when to offer a bowl of stew, when to tell a joke, when to let you sit in her kitchen without saying a word. In a season where everything feels like survival, she is comfort. She's not the only one. There's Bram, the miller's son, who carved a whistle for your youngest just because she looked sad. Or Ida, the baker's apprentice, who once slipped you a chunk of sugared bread with a wink and a warning not to tell anyone. Historians rarely write about this part of winter, the small kindnesses that make the cold bearable. The cup of ale shared without expectation. the extra scoop of porridge when someone's cough lingers too long, the unspoken agreement to pretend you didn't see your neighbor crying by the woodpile. In your village, generosity isn't grand, it's quiet. A blanket draped over a sleeping child, a handful of dried apples left on a doorstep, a warm stone passed hand to hand at bedtime. There's an old belief that the warmth you give comes back to you threefold. You're not sure if that's theology or wishful thinking, but you act on it anyway. Tonight, as the wind howls and the snow slants sideways, you find yourself knocking on your neighbor's door, Old Man Hob, who hasn't been seen in 2 days. He opens it slowly, blinking like a badger roused from a nap. "I brought soup," you say. He looks at the bowl, then at you, then back at the bowl. "You put meat in it," he grumbles. "Bits," you admit. He nods, "Good lad." You sit with him while he eats. Say nothing, just stare into the hearth and feel the tension in his shoulders soften. When he starts snoring, you quietly put another log on the fire and slip out. At home, your wife smiles as you enter. "Checked on Hob?" she asks. You nod. "Good," she says, already handing you a cup of something warm. "Now sit." The fire crackles. The children chatter. And somewhere, beneath the familiar din of domestic winter, you feel it, the warmth of community. Even the pig seems content tonight, curling up closer to the hearth than usual. Later, as you tuck the children in and check the windows for drafts, you think about Maud, about her mittens, about the way she always seems to know when you need reminding that you're not alone. You whisper a quiet thanks to the dark. Not for the cold, not for the struggle, but for the people who soften its edges. There's a question you've been quietly avoiding all winter. It creeps in on nights when the fire burns low and the wind hums just wrong through the rafters. What happens to your soul if you freeze to death? It's not something people say out loud, too grim, too final. But the question is there, tucked beneath every blanket, flickering in every candle's shadow. You grew up with stories, of course, tales where winter is a kind of spirit itself, luring people out with promises of starlight and stillness, then clutching them tight until they never come home. There's the legend of the frost bride, who kisses travelers in the snow and leaves them smiling, frozen forever, or the tale of the saint of silent steps, who walks the forests collecting souls that didn't quite make it to spring. The old priest says your soul stays safe if you die clean, no grudges, no theft, no sins heavy enough to melt through the snow. He says if you pass in the cold, wrapped in prayer and humility, your breath becomes a wisp the angels can follow home. But the washerwoman insists the soul lingers wherever the body lies. She says the woods are full of spirits not angry, just confused, lost in frost, forgotten. Historians, when they get around to peasant belief, often gloss over this stuff. They like the big stories, saints, martyrs, relics, not the quiet fears of villagers wondering if the soul gets cold too. You think about this often, especially on days like today, when the sky is flat and gray, and a shepherd hasn't come back from the hills. They say he knew the land better than anyone. They say he took only his cloak, a staff, and a scrap of bread. They say he was only supposed to be gone a day. Now the searchers have returned, empty-handed. The fire burns brighter that night. Not out of celebration, out of defiance. You feed it your best logs. You whisper to it, like it's a charm against forgetting. You wonder what the body feels in that last moment. Is it peace, or is it just quiet? They found a traveler once, years ago, just outside the village. He'd curled up beneath a tree, arms around his chest, eyes open. His face was soft, almost smiling. They said he looked like he'd fallen asleep remembering something warm. You tell your children this gently, in the tone used for bedtime tales. If you're ever cold and lost, you say, call to the fire, it knows how to find you. They nod, solemn. One insists on tucking an ember into his mitten next time he goes out. You say no, but appreciate the intent. Your wife keeps a tiny pouch of herbs by the door: juniper, rosemary, a pinch of blessed ash. Just in case, she says, if a soul wanders in, I want it to feel welcome. Some nights you light a candle and place it on the windowsill. It's an old custom, a flame for the lost, a light to follow back. You've never seen a spirit in the snow, but you've felt something, a hush deeper than silence, a breath of warmth in an otherwise frozen moment. Maybe it's just wind, or maybe it's something else. Tonight, you stoke the fire one more time. You place another log on the pile. You wrap the children in their cloaks. You make sure the door is latched but not locked. And just before you settle into sleep, you whisper into the dark, "If you're cold out there, come closer. There's room by the fire." The night is gentler now. The snow still sits in soft drifts outside your door, but it no longer feels like a threat, just scenery, just a part of the world. Inside, the fire glows low, less a blaze, more a heartbeat. Its light flickers along the beams, casting shadows that move slow and sleepy. The children are curled in a heap by the hearth. The pig, content and round, breathes softly beneath the window. You sit back on your stool, cradling a mug of warm cider, and let yourself be still. You've made it. Not to spring, not quite, but through the worst of it. The long nights, the ice-bitten chores, the whispered fears, the endless stew. You think back over the season. You remember the first frost on the roof, the kindling that wouldn't catch, the stew that nearly froze in the pot, the laughter during the feast, the mittens from Maud, the wolves circling in the dark. You remember the weight of winter pressing down on your shoulders, and the way it lifted, inch by inch, with every shared bowl of soup, every song hummed by the fire, every act of ordinary care. Historians won't write about this, not these quiet triumphs. They'll talk about kings and battles and revolts. But you know the real battle was here in your cottage, with your family, among the goats and porridge. You glance over at your wife, who's mending a sleeve for the third time this month. Her stitches are steady. Her face is soft with fatigue. You smile, and she returns it, just a small curve of the mouth. But it's enough. There's a ritual you've come to love at this time of year. The last log. You save one piece of wood, dry, dense, carefully chosen, and place it on the fire with a whisper of thanks. Thanks for survival. Thanks for warmth. Thanks for everything you didn't lose. You do it now. The log catches slowly, reluctantly, then it glows. The pig sighs. Outside, the wind turns gentle, not warm, not yet, but softer, less biting. Tomorrow you'll check the fence again, patch a tunic, take stock of your seeds. But tonight, there is only this. This fire, this silence, this peace. Let yourself settle now. The chores are done, the soup's been eaten, the door is latched. There's nothing left to carry, no tools to fix, no cold left to endure, just the gentle hush of a house at rest. The fire's glow dims to embers, each flicker a memory, a heartbeat, a slow sigh. Breathe in, the scent of wood smoke, wool, and warm straw. Breathe out, the tension in your shoulders, the chill in your bones, the weight of the season. Let the warmth reach your fingers, let your toes uncurl, let the day release you. You've walked the frozen fields, you've chopped, hauled, scraped, stitched, mended, and hoped. And now you're here, where the quiet is kind and the cold can't follow. The children breathe steadily, the goat stirs and settles, the roof creaks once, like an old friend shifting in sleep. You're wrapped in softness, in stories, in the memory of every night survived. Spring will come, but not tonight. Tonight you're safe. You're warm. You're home.